and the board comes out 9 of hearts, 5 of diamonds, 7 of diamonds. So 9
Checking
of hearts, 5
in
of diamonds,
while
7 of
cruising in to Peppermill on a Thursday afternoon and listening to the Crush Live Poker Podcast by Bart Hansen. It's just become a part of my life, essentially. You know, part of my weekly routine. I always listen to it on either Wednesday or Thursday, and I just wouldn't want to ever not do that. And it's just been one of those things that's gradually helped me make more money year in and year out. And I, of course, would highly recommend it. There's one particular old podcast that Bart did years ago that you just have to listen to. And I'm not going to give that out here. I'm only going to give that out if you sign up and get 25% off for life on a basic or premium subscription by using the promo code BENDEET. You can DM me on Instagram, and I'll let you know which podcast you absolutely must listen to. Anyway, as we head in, I remembered a story that happened back when I was playing at the Oaks, which you saw back on vlog 129 in Emeryville, California. And I'm still laughing about it a couple of weeks later. It was probably my favorite example of a player berating another player for beating him out of a pot that I've ever seen. And I've certainly seen some good ones. And this is, one of these, young guys that just thinks he knows everything. And he was frustrated that he lost a pot with pocket jacks. And he says something to the guy, and the guy says something back. And then a couple of hands get played. But this guy's still not over. And a couple of minutes later, he comes out and he rips him again. He's like, man, I play so much better than you. You're doing crazy stuff. You're out here cracking jacks with, like, king, queen or something. It's probably my favorite two-word phrase that's ever been uttered at a poker table. Man, you out here cracking jacks. Yeah, because that never happens. Wow, I'm stunned. It's like the guy who, doesn't hit his set, and then the next flop is like, oh my god, flop lag. Yeah, because that never occurs. Cracking jacks. Man, what's wrong with you, bro? You out here, you cracked my pocket fours, dog. Shit. Anyway, let's go play some poker. It was a week that featured me playing a couple of sessions at Peppermill. The other one was tilt-inducing, a massive calling station sitting down on my immediate left and just doing what you want him to do, just throwing money into the pot with basically any two cards against me. I played 6 big pots against him. How did I do? 0-6. He just drew out on me every single time, including a really big hand that he got me with the skinny. So that was a $1,761 loss that did not feel good at all. Took me a while to get into the game on this occasion, and the first hand of the day I witnessed was pocket jacks losing to king queen. You just can't make this stuff up. First hand comes when the game's lone VIP limps in early position, and an unknown calls in the low jack. I raise ace-jack in late position and end up getting 2 callers. With 95 in, the flop comes ace-queen-7, 2 diamonds. Gets checked to me. With top pair, I bet 65. The under-the-gun VIP then check min-raises me, and the low jack folds. Now, I definitely felt he'd raise ace-queen pre-flop here, which he didn't do. I also felt that he'd play queen-7 suited under the gun, so that's a concern. It was close, but for a min-raise, I opted to call. And with 355 in, the turn is the 3 of hearts, and now he checks. Truly bizarre, I thought. I felt a lot better about my hand after he checked, but not good enough to bet. The river comes the jack of hearts, giving me 2 pair. He checks. Now I feel really good about betting. I make it 150. At that point, I was operating under the assumption that he probably just had a weak ace. He snap calls, giving us a $655 pot, and I win against his ace-7 offsuit. So he had the 2 pair on the flop, for some reason didn't bet it on the turn, and we successfully suck out to win this pot. And for those of you that have watched all of my vlogs, you know that is not something that's happened often. I then play a hand where I get jacks cracked. Although I didn't have pocket jacks. I had the ace jack and hit a jack. I was up against king queen, and I ended up losing about $80 total in the pot. I then check in on Reno Grinder, who's got a very unique wardrobe going on. I pick up ace king in the hijack and raise to 25 over a limp, which gets me heads up with the tough player in the cutoff. With 60 in, it comes ace, 8 deuce, 2 hearts. I bet 30, and she calls. With 120 in, the turn is an offsuit 3. I bet 50, and she raises to 100. Now, getting min raised by this opponent is a whole different ballgame than getting raised by the other one. She's just never taking this line with ace queen, I don't think. She likely 3-bets ace king, so what does that leave? I didn't like it, but I opted to fold. And while I didn't see visual proof, she told me later on that she had pocket deuces, which I felt was about the most likely hand in the first place. I then have a very random thought during the Washington-New York Thursday Night Football game, and that is that the newly installed chandeliers that serve no purpose other than to obscure the very expensive TVs in the Peppermill Poker Room very closely resemble the city-sized spacecrafts that enter the Earth's atmosphere on Independence Day. I lose a few more hands, and that brings us to this one. I pick up ace king of spades under the gun and make it 20. Plus 2, 3-bets to 60, and the cutoff cold calls. Now, given what I know about the 3-better here, 4-betting is not the best play, given his very narrow 3-bet range. But the good news is he's the type that will give me action if I hit. So with 185 in, the flop is ace of diamonds, 10 of clubs, 7 of spades, and I check. Plus 2 bets 80, and the cutoff calls. I decide to just call here, planning to either lead out or check raise spade turns. With 425 in, the turn is the king of clubs, giving me top 2 instead. Now, I don't know the cutoff, other than the fact that he just called an $85 river bet with the nut flush a few hours before that when there was a pair on the board. The other guy I know very well, and he's more of a call too much guy as opposed to bet when not good kind of guy. So I decided to bet 150. Both call. So with 875 in, the river is a great card for me. It's the 5 of diamonds. I bet out for 235, hoping that one of these two has managed to pick up 2 pair along the way, plus 2 snap folds. Later he'd go on to say he had queens, which makes sense. The cutoff tanks forever, but finally pays off, giving us a $1,345 pot, and he shows king 10 of hearts for the weaker 2 pair, just like I'd hoped. Then in a single raise pot, I pick up the 5-6 of hearts and flop a straight on 7-8-9 2 diamonds. The big blind is a young guy who I don't know at all, but seems to have recently made the jump up from $2 no limit. Now that rarely ever happens, by the way, so credit to him for doing it, if that's indeed what is happening here. He bets out on this board in the big blind for 30 and under the gun calls him. I raise to 115. He calls, and the other guy folds. So with 295 in, the turn's the ace of hearts. Big blind checks. I bet 150, and he does not take too long with it before making the call. So with 595 in, the river is the deuce of hearts, and he checks. I figured the most likely thing for him to have here is ace X of diamonds, so I decided to bet accordingly, making it 2 black chips. He starts hemming and hawing, and that made me more convinced that I had the right read. But then he says out loud, "I'm so convinced you have Jack 10. And that actually made me think, is there any way that he's actually scared with 10-6? I didn't think that was too likely. But it becomes clear that he's going to fold his hand. He turns it over and mucks and shows 5-6 of spades. So we had the same hand, but he gives me a little bit too much credit. Now I have to give him some credit for being able to make that fold, because, as I mentioned, I think he's come up from 1-2, and most players cannot do that. And even though he was half wrong in this instance, it's still an impressive fold, because if you want to make the jump from the $2 game to the $5 game, it's the hands you fold that make the difference as much, if not more, than the hands that you call with. Then we get a couple of limps, including local favorite Mr. Z. I pick up the skinny in the cutoff, and I decide to try and take advantage of a current winning image here and make it 35. Button snap calls. 3 others call as well. Not exactly what I was looking for here. So with 175 in, the flop is a very good one for me. Ace Jack 5 with 2 hearts. Got shot straight draw and a flush draw. Check to me, and I'm going to try this here. I settle on a fairly big sizing, making it 115, and my winning image pays off as all 4 guys fold. And because it's the skinny, I of course have to show the bluff. I then lose back about $100 when I value own myself with ace 8 of diamonds on an ace high monotone flop, when my opponent had played his top 2 pair very cautiously. Fortunately, I got that money back minutes later when I rivered a 10 high flush and get paid off by top pair. I then lost back $450 when I really should not have lost nearly that much at all. I'm not going to show what happened here because I'm confident the guy that I was involved in the hand with will watch this, and I don't want him to know what I did, but I can acknowledge the fact that it was not the highlight of the day for me. That rarely comes into play with vlog watchers, but in this case, I think it does. I then pick up ace king of clubs under the gun and make it 20. A VIP in the cutoff calls, and then a super tight player on the button makes it 50. Now, I don't want to blow the VIP out of this pot, so I just call, and the cutoff completes. So with 155 in, the flop is 5-6 deuce, 2 clubs. Seemed like a perfect spot for me to try and take this pot down right now with a bet, and if I get called, well, I like my chances then too. I bet out $110, and both pretty quickly throw their hands away. I play about another hour, rack up, and book the win. All right, a 6-hour session in the books, booking a win, feeling pretty good about things. You know, I was thinking back to what I was saying earlier, and I don't really know if what I said was the case, but I do think that that one guy that folded the straight when I had the same straight, I do think he worked his way up from 1-2. I believe. I could be wrong on this. But as I was mentioning, that's very uncommon. It's much more common with another guy that I'm seeing around here at Peppermill, and that's the guy who started off playing very loose in the $0, $5 game. Then he shifted to playing very tight in the $5 game, doing all this while feeding another addiction that he has, unfortunately for him, in another area of the casino. He cannot stay out of this area. He's in there more than he is the poker room with his seat locked up. But he goes from playing loose 3-5 to tight 3-5, and now he's back to 1-2. I saw that today. So what's next? He'll be gone from poker. That's much more common than this other dude successfully working his way up. Obviously, it's what I did, but I've had success because most other people around here have not been able to do what I've been able to do. So it'll be interesting to see if he ends up becoming a regular in this game and a guy that I have to battle with consistently. It'll be challenging. Anyway, let's go to the question of the week. All right, this week's question of the week comes from Fish Poker, who I'm guessing is not a fish, but that's neither here nor there. He says, I've been on a downswing lately and seem to lose motivation at the table, which means that I don't play well. Do you have anything to listen to or routine that you do pre-session that pumps you up and gets your head in the game? Well, I'm not exactly sure what he's asking, but I'll address this in 2 ways. The first of which comes about the motivation part. And maybe I'm unique, but I've talked about this before in the sense that I've always been a guy who's going to get my hours in. And that's just always been the way that I am. But I never get too many hours in. I've pretty much always been a 20-hour-a-week guy all the time. I was definitely more back when I was just doing one radio show a day. And I didn't have, obviously, my son or any other commitments. So at that point, we'd get a lot more hours in and wouldn't make nearly as much per hour. But I'm more motivated to get my hours in when I've been in a downswing. And it's not necessarily just to get the money back. It's just to prove to myself that I have what it takes to get the money back. Now, as far as his other part of the question, that's, is there anything that kind of pumps me up? Now, I'm thinking I know what he's asking me. Like if I had a song that I was going to listen to before a big session to try to fire me up type thing. And the song that I'd go with, like in anticipation of a really big session, or like if I were a tournament player, if I was like walking into the main event and getting fired up, I think I'd go with In the Air Tonight, either the original Phil Collins version or the remake by Nonpoint for the movie Miami Vice. I think I'd go with either one because both are great. And that song just always has that, like, you know, something big is coming, it's imminent type thing that I've always liked. So I'm not sure if that's exactly what he was asking or not, but that's what I'm going to say. Oh, and we do have a bonus question with a short answer. From PK Dollars writes in, Ben, you definitely have an affinity for the Peppermill and how they run their poker games. I have 9 days of vacation to use this year that aren't spoken for. Can you give me a reason to drive from Lake Havasu City, ignore Vegas, and come to Reno Peppermill to play poker? Nope.